Before you drift off tonight, imagine a sky that hasn't yet learned to shine. No stars, no moon, just an endless breath of stillness. That's where our story begins, not with a god or a mountain, but with a sigh so deep it became the first sound of creation. The ancients called it chaos. It wasn't a monster or a void of evil. It was everything, folded into nothing, like the pause between heartbeats before the first begins. Out of that breath came Gaia, the earth, soft, patient, eternal. Then Tartarus, the shadow beneath her roots. And Eros, quiet desire, the pull that makes one thing reach for another. From Gaia's vast body came the mountains, her ribs pushing up against the firmament. She dreamed of someone to hold her, and so the sky appeared, Uranus. He covered her completely, and where they touched, the first Titans were born. Oceanus, whose arms encircled the world, Theia, who brought light, and Cronus, the one who would one day turn against his father, but paradise is never still for long. Uranus feared his children, too strong, too strange, so he hid them deep within Gaia's body. Imagine the weight of that, a mother carrying storms and fire under her skin. Her pain grew into rage, and from that rage she shaped a blade of flint. She whispered to her sons, "Who among you will free me?" Only Cronus stepped forward. When night fell, he took the blade and struck. The sound wasn't thunder, it was the birth of time. From Uranus's fall came both power and consequence. The blood that spilled touched the earth and gave life to the Furies, those who would one day chase men for their crimes. From the foam of the sea rose something gentler, Aphrodite, beauty itself, born of violence and calm. Cronus now ruled the world, and for a while, peace returned. But prophecy has always lurked behind the curtain. Gaia whispered again, "One of your children will overthrow you, just as you overthrew your father. And fear makes even gods cruel. So, when his wife Rhea bore a child, Cronus swallowed it whole. One after another, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, gone, consumed by their father's dread, until the last child came, Zeus. Rhea, trembling, hid him in a cave on Crete. The wind there sang lullabies, and bees fed him honey. While Cronus devoured a stone wrapped in cloth, Zeus grew stronger under the watch of nymphs who danced in circles so their laughter would drown his cries. Years passed, and one day a young man stood at the edge of the sea, thunder hiding in his pulse. Zeus returned home with a plan. He offered Cronus a drink laced with something divine. When the old god swallowed, he began to heave, and the swallowed children burst forth, alive, angry, shining. That was the beginning of the war, the clash that shook creation itself. For 10 years, the world burned. Zeus led his siblings, the Olympians, against the Titans. Mountains shattered. Rivers turned red with fire. When it ended, the Titans were cast into Tartarus, chained beneath the earth. And the sky finally opened, washed clean by lightning. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades divided the cosmos. Sky to Zeus, sea to Poseidon, underworld to Hades, and so began a new order, the age of the Olympians. But the thing about power is that it always remembers the taste of fear, and even gods can dream of rebellion. Tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine that ancient silence again, the first breeze after the storm, the hum of the world still young. That's where we'll return next time, to a sky still trembling from war and a god learning what it means to rule. The world after war was quiet, but not peaceful. The sea was still learning how to breathe again, and the mountains, split by thunder, whispered of what they had seen. Above them, Zeus stood on Olympus, the storm still flickering in his veins. Victory, he found, did not taste like glory, it tasted like exhaustion. The air smelled of iron and smoke. The age of Titans was gone, but their shadows were not. Beneath the earth, chained deep within Tartarus, the Titans still moved in restless sleep. Their voices were distant echoes, carried up through cracks in the ground. Some said that when thunder rolled, it wasn't Zeus at all. It was their dreams stirring. And sometimes Gaia herself trembled in pity for her imprisoned sons. She had given birth to both victor and vanquished, and neither side made her proud. Still, Olympus rose higher each day. The new gods began to build their thrones, bright, cold, carved from clouds and gold. Each claimed a domain, Poseidon's palace beneath the waves, Hades' realm beneath the soil, Demeter's green fields, Hera's halls of order and pride. They believed they were immortal, untouchable, but no reign begins without a test. The first came from the earth itself. Gaia, unable to bear her sorrow, birthed new giants, taller, stronger, wilder than the Titans. They rose from the mountains and struck at Olympus, shaking the very sky. Zeus hurled lightning, Poseidon broke seas upon them, Athena's spear found their hearts one by one. The world quaked for days, and when silence finally returned, Olympus still stood. But the gods had learned something they would never forget, that the ground beneath them could still rise up. So they built their myths not just on power, but on fear. Fear kept mortals obedient, and obedience kept Olympus shining. To love them meant to fear them, a strange kind of worship that would echo through all of history. Zeus ruled as king, but even kings need a balance. Hera, his sister and queen, became that balance, his mirror and his rival. Her patience was long, her jealousy longer. They quarreled often, their thundercloud tempests shaking even the peaks of Olympus. Yet in every storm was affection, the twisted kind that only gods could understand. When the sky finally cleared, the world began to change again. Rivers remembered their paths, grass returned to the burned plains, and from the soil, humankind began to take shape. Prometheus, a Titan who had fought on the side of Zeus, pitied these fragile creatures. They were small, helpless, cold in the endless night. So he climbed to the heavens and stole fire from the gods, hiding it inside a hollow reed. When mortals first saw the flame, they wept, not in fear, but in wonder. They warmed their hands and whispered his name in gratitude, and for a while Prometheus smiled. But fire, like truth, was never meant to be free. When Zeus discovered what had been done, his fury was boundless. He summoned Prometheus, but the Titan did not kneel. "For pity is not a sin," Prometheus said. But Zeus' wrath needed no reason. He chained the Titan to a lonely cliff, high in the Caucasus Mountains, where each morning an eagle came to tear at his flesh. Each night the wounds healed, so that the pain could begin again. And far below, humankind still warmed their hands, never knowing what it had cost. Perhaps that was the first secret guilt of humanity, comfort built upon the suffering of someone unseen. The gods looked down and saw their new creation building fires, shaping tools, dreaming. And for the first time, they realized what Prometheus had truly given them, not warmth, but defiance. Zeus's anger deepened, and punishment followed again. If men had been given fire, he decided, women would be their trial. He called upon Hephaestus, the smith of the gods, to sculpt a creature of flawless beauty. Athena gave her wisdom, Aphrodite her charm, Hermes her cunning tongue. When she opened her eyes, she was perfect. They named her Pandora, the one who bears all gifts. But there was one more gift, wrapped carefully by the gods, a sealed jar, which she was forbidden to open. You can guess the rest. Curiosity is older than sin. Pandora unsealed the jar, and from it poured everything humans had never known before: sorrow, envy, disease, despair. The sky darkened, the seas cried. By the time she closed the lid, only one thing remained inside: hope. Small, fragile, but enough. The gods watched as humankind struggled, as they built cities and burned them down, as they prayed and cursed in the same breath. Olympus had won its crown, but the cost was endless vigilance, because now, for the first time, they had created something that could imagine life without them. Far away, on the edge of the world, Prometheus still endured, and when thunder rolled across the mountains, mortals whispered that he was laughing, maybe not in pain, but in triumph, because even bound, he had given the gods something they could never take back: the spark of thought, the courage to question, the warmth of rebellion. So tonight, if you sit beside a soft flame, let your eyes rest in its glow. You're looking at the oldest secret of the world, a piece of stolen light, still burning, still alive. And beyond that flame, high above, the gods are watching, some with envy, some with pride, all remembering the day a titan dared to give humans what they never should have had. Next time, we'll wander into a different kind of fire, the one that burned in the hearts of heroes. The first among them will be a man who set sail toward the impossible, Jason and his Argonauts. The wind tonight feels ancient. You can almost hear the rhythm of the oars cutting through dark water. That's how it began, with the sound of rowing, with a ship built for glory and fated for loss. Long after the Titans fell and mortals learned to build their own fires, a new generation of heroes rose from the dust. They were half divine, half flawed, children of gods and humans, standing between both worlds, and among them, one name shone brightest: Jason. He was born in Iolcus, a small kingdom perched near the Thessalian Sea. But as with most heroes, his story began with fear. His uncle, King Peleus, had stolen the throne and feared the prophecy that warned him, "Beware the man who comes with one sandal." Jason was still a child when his mother, fearing for his life, sent him to be raised by the wise centaur Chiron, half man, half horse, the teacher of heroes. There, Jason grew among the whispering pines, learning the ways of healing and courage, listening to stories that stretched back to the dawn of time. And when he became a man, he walked down from the mountain barefoot, losing one sandal as he crossed a rushing river. When he arrived in Iolcus, the prophecy unfolded like thunder. Peleus trembled, but masked his fear with a smile. "My dear nephew," he said, "if you wish for your rightful throne, prove your worth. Bring me the golden fleece, a gift from the gods themselves." Everyone in the hall fell silent. The fleece hung far away across treacherous seas, guarded by monsters and magic. But Jason only nodded. A task impossible for mortals was simply a beginning for heroes. Soon, the greatest men of Greece answered his call. 50 of them, each with a story of their own. Hercules, the mighty son of Zeus. Orpheus, whose music could calm even the stones. The twins, Castor and Pollux, sworn brothers of light and war. And at the ship's prow stood the carved figure of Hera, Whispering guidance from the heavens, they named the ship Argo, meaning swift, and themselves the Argonauts. When the sail filled for the first time, the sea turned silver beneath them. Even the gods paused to watch. Their first stop was the island of Lemnos, where only women remained, the men long gone, slain in a fit of vengeance. The women welcomed the Argonauts warmly, too warmly perhaps. For months, laughter and song replaced the sound of rowing. But Hera, ever watchful, stirred the wind one night and reminded Jason of his quest. He left quietly at dawn, as the women watched from the cliffs, their faces pale in the sunrise. The next trials were harsher. They faced harpies, winged monsters who fouled the food of a blind prophet named Phineus. With the help of Boreas's sons, Zetes and Calais, the harpies were driven away, and Phineus, in gratitude, revealed a secret. The simple gades, the clashing rocks, they move like jaws, crushing ships that dare to pass. If you wish to live, release a dove before you sail through. If it survives, row as if the sea itself were chasing you. Jason did as told. The dove flew ahead, its wings brushing the closing rocks, losing only a few feathers before it escaped. The Argonauts followed, rowing until their arms burned. The rocks smashed behind them, but they had passed. And from that day forward, the clashing rocks stood still, forever silent, defeated by courage. At last, after months of storms and strange shores, the Argo reached Colchis, the land where the golden fleece hung, guarded by a dragon that never slept. Here, fate introduced another name, Medea. She was the daughter of King Aeetes, a sorceress, clever and restless, touched by the favor of Hecate, goddess of witchcraft. And when she saw Jason, something ancient stirred within her. Was it love, or the gods moving pieces in their endless game? No one could tell. Jason faced the king's challenge to yoke 2 fire-breathing bulls, sow a field with dragon's teeth, and fight the warriors who would spring from the soil. An impossible task. But that night, Medea visited him in secret. Her eyes glowed like the edge of the moon. She gave him a potion, the sap of a moonlit herb, to shield him from flame, and she whispered, "If you live, remember me." At dawn, Jason entered the field. The bulls roared, but their fire slid off his skin like rain. He cast the dragon's teeth and watched as armored men rose from the ground, their eyes hollow with the rage of creation. Then, remembering Medea's words, he threw a stone among them. Confused, they turned on each other, and within minutes, the earth was quiet again. Still, Aeetes refused to surrender the fleece. So that night, Jason and Medea crept into the sacred grove. The dragon guarding the prize coiled and hissed, its scales reflecting the stars. Medea sang softly, her voice a thread of sleep. The creature's eyelids fell heavy, its coils loosened. Jason reached up, took the fleece, golden, shimmering, alive, and for a moment the night glowed as bright as day. When they fled, the gods themselves seemed to stir. The Argo raced homeward, chased by the fury of Aeetes. Medea's heart broke with every wave, for she had betrayed her father for love, but love, as every mortal and god would learn, has never come without a price. Back in Greece, Jason presented the golden fleece to Peleus, but victory turned bitter. The usurper mocked him, broke his promise, and banished him again. Medea, betrayed, used her magic to bring justice, dark, final justice. And though the fleece still shone, it could not warm the hearts of those who had sacrificed everything to claim it. The Argonauts scattered, some to kingdoms, some to graves, some to silence. The age of great voyages was fading, giving way to a different kind of story, not of seas and monsters, but of hearts and gods who meddled too much. And so, as the stars rise tonight, the waves of the Aegean still carry the sound of oars. Each splash, each whisper of wind is a memory of the time when men dared to chase gold that glowed like the sun and learned instead the weight of what they loved. Next, we'll follow a different flame, the one that burned not on the sea, but in a labyrinth built for a monster. The story of Crete, of a craftsman who flew too high and a boy who forgot the warnings of the gods. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the air turning warm, filled with the scent of salt and beeswax. We are leaving the forests of Thessaly behind and sailing south to an island where genius and cruelty shared a single breath, Crete. The island of kings, bulls, and a maze no one was meant to escape. The story begins not with a hero, but with a craftsman. His name was Daedalus. He built wonders for kings, statues that moved as if alive, doors that opened with thought, and inventions that made even the gods pause. But even brilliance can be dangerous when it draws too much light. Daedalus fled Athens after envy turned against him. He found refuge on Crete under King Minos, a ruler both admired and feared. Minos had everything a man could want: wealth, power, divine favor. But he also carried a curse. Long ago, Minos prayed to Poseidon for a sign of his right to rule. The sea god sent him a perfect white bull, a creature of such beauty that men knelt when it passed. Minos was to sacrifice it in gratitude, but when the day came, greed whispered louder than duty. He spared the divine animal and offered another in its place. The ocean went silent for a moment, the kind of silence that only means fury. Poseidon's revenge came quietly, through the heart of Minos' wife, Pasiphae. He cursed her with a desire as unnatural as it was unstoppable. She fell in love with the bull, and in her torment, she turned to Daedalus. He, bound by obedience, built her a hollow wooden cow, lifelike, terrible. Inside it she hid, and the union that followed birthed a creature both pitied and feared, the Minotaur. Half man, half bull, it devoured everything that reminded it of light. Minos, horrified yet unable to destroy it, demanded Daedalus build a prison worthy of such sin. And so came the labyrinth, a maze so perfect in its confusion that even its maker feared to walk too far inside. Once the Minotaur was trapped, Minos began sending offerings from Athens, 14 young souls each year, 7 boys and 7 girls, to wander the labyrinth until the beast found them. For years, the cries of the lost echoed beneath Crete, and no one escaped, until one ship carried a prince who refused to die quietly. His name was Theseus. When he arrived, Crete was shining, music, wine, and the illusion of peace. But beneath the marble, fear was thick. Theseus met the king's daughter, Ariadne, who saw in him something different: calm courage, the kind that even gods might envy. Love bloomed in the space of a heartbeat, and love, as always, plotted its escape. That night, Ariadne came to Theseus with a gift, not a sword, but a ball of thread. "Unroll it as you walk," she whispered, "so the path back will remember you." He took it, kissed her hand, and descended into the dark. The air grew thick with dust and silence. Each corner felt the same. Every echo sounded like breath behind him, until finally he heard it, the sound of hooves scraping stone, the low growl of hunger. The Minotaur was waiting, The fight was short and brutal, no divine thunder, no glory, just a man with trembling hands and a creature that had never known mercy. When it ended, the labyrinth fell silent for the first time since it was built. Theseus followed the thread back to the world, sunlight flooding his face. He and Ariadne fled Crete together, her heart light for the first time, until sleep betrayed her. On the island of Naxos, as dawn rose pink and slow, she woke alone. Theseus had gone. Some say he left her from fear of a god's jealousy. Others say Dionysus, the god of wine, claimed her for himself. Either way, she never saw Athens. And Daedalus? He remained in Crete, a prisoner of his own genius. Minos could not let him go, not when he alone knew the secrets of the labyrinth. So Daedalus waited in silence, watching the sea he could not touch, until one night he gathered feathers fallen from gulls and bound them with wax. He built wings, 2 pairs, one for himself, one for his son, Icarus. "Fly close to me," he warned, "but not too high. The sun will melt the wax." At dawn, they rose into the sky. Imagine it, the wind rushing beneath them, the sea sparkling like polished glass. For the first time, man flew, and for a while, it was enough. But Icarus was young, and freedom is a drug no warning can weaken. He climbed higher and higher until the air grew warm and the wax began to weep. His wings fell apart in a glittering rain, and he plunged silently into the sea below. Daedalus landed alone. He built a small shrine on the shore and hung his son's broken feathers inside. And though his inventions would be praised for centuries, that sound, the rush of falling, followed him for the rest of his life. They say the sea where Icarus fell still glows gold at sunrise, like sunlight caught in the waves. Maybe it's just reflection, or maybe the gods left a reminder there of how close creation always is to tragedy. For now, let the air grow still again. You can almost feel the warmth fading, the wax cooling, the echo of wings disappearing beyond the horizon. The labyrinth sleeps, and so do its ghosts. Next time, we'll sail toward a different kind of power. Not a maze of stone, but a city of wisdom and war. The age of Athens is coming, and with it, the rise of heroes who sought truth instead of conquest. Let the sea fade behind us now. Ahead lies a land of marble and olive trees, where the hum of cicadas replaces the crash of waves. This is where wisdom found its home, where the goddess Athena claimed her city. And though the stones of Athens have crumbled and been rebuilt 100 times, the wind that moves through them still whispers her name. Athena's birth, they said, was unlike any other. She did not come from a mother's womb, but from thought itself. Zeus, the storm king, had swallowed his first wife, Metis, wisdom in her purest form, fearing a prophecy that her child would surpass him. For a while, he felt safe, but one morning, a sharp pain split his skull like lightning through the clouds. He fell to his knees, clutching his head, as Hephaestus, the smith of the gods, came running with his hammer. With a single swing, the world changed. From the cleft in Zeus's forehead stepped Athena, fully grown, armored, calm. Her gray eyes shone with the reflection of a mind that had already seen the wars to come. Where others cried or trembled, she only looked around and said, softly, "I am here." Unlike her father, Athena ruled not through fear, but through balance. She was the goddess of war, yes, but not the kind that burned fields and left ash behind. Her war was of strategy, of reason, of the quiet pause before the first sword is drawn. She was also the guardian of artisans, philosophers, and dreamers, anyone who fought with hands or with thought. When it came time for the gods to decide who would protect a small new city on the Attic coast, Poseidon claimed it first. He struck the ground with his trident, and from the rock sprang a salt water spring. Its roar was thunderous, powerful, but the water was too bitter to drink. Then Athena stepped forward. She touched her spear to the soil, and from that spot grew an olive tree, green and silver in the sun. The people watched its branches shimmer. Oil for their lamps, wood for their homes, fruit for their hunger. And in that moment, they knew whom to choose. The city became hers, and in gratitude, they named it Athens. Time flowed softly through its streets. Temples rose like frozen prayers. Markets filled with music, laughter, and debate. Men and women gathered beneath the olive groves to argue about beauty, virtue, and the shape of the soul. And above them all, on a hill that touched the sky, stood the Parthenon, the marble home of their silent guardian. Yet even in this city of reason, the gods' shadows lingered. One of Athena's closest companions was the hero Perseus, brave, steady, but haunted by a quest few would dare to take. Far to the west lived the Gorgon Medusa, once a maiden so beautiful that men traveled miles just to see her hair move like silk in the wind. But beauty can be dangerous. They say Poseidon saw her in Athena's temple and defiled her there, staining sacred ground. Athena, enraged not at the god but at the mortal, punished Medusa, transforming her golden curls into snakes and her face into terror itself. From that moment, one glance could turn any man to stone. It was Perseus who was sent to end her. With Athena's mirror shield gleaming like moonlight, he crept upon Medusa as she slept. He did not look at her, only at her reflection, and with one stroke, the silence of her lair deepened forever. From her blood sprang two children, Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the warrior. Athena took Pegasus under her wing, a creature of air and dream, proof that even in curses, life could find a way to take flight. Perseus brought the Gorgon's head to Athena, who placed it upon her shield, the aegis, not as a trophy, but as a warning. Wisdom, she knew, required remembering what it had destroyed. And so Athens prospered under her watch. Its people built schools and theaters, sculpted marble until it seemed to breathe, and spoke poetry that rippled like the sea. But the gods, as ever, could not bear peace for long. Their rivalries, born from pride and love, began to stir again, and once more mortals would be drawn into their quarrels. It started with a simple wish, the wish of a mortal woman named Arachne, a weaver from a distant village. Her tapestries were so perfect that even nymphs stopped to admire them. When praised, she laughed softly and said, "Athena herself could not weave as I do." The goddess heard. She appeared before Arachne in disguise, warning her with kindness to speak with humility. But Arachne, bold and young, refused. "Then let her come and prove it," she said, and Athena came, radiant, solemn, her fingers still smelling faintly of olive leaves. They sat across from one another and began to weave. Athena's tapestry shimmered with scenes of divine justice, the gods in their glory, mortals born in reverence. Arachne's, however, told another truth. It showed the gods' cruelty, Zeus's disguises, Poseidon's wrath, Apollo's vanity. It was perfect, painfully so. Athena's heart broke, not from anger, but from shame. She touched Arachne's shoulder. "Your gift is real," she whispered, But no mortal should carry such knowledge. And before the weaver could reply, her limbs began to shrink, her fingers thinning into threads. Arachne became the first spider, doomed to weave forever, caught between punishment and pride. Even the goddess of wisdom, it seemed, could not escape the contradictions of divinity. Athens learned this too. For every philosopher, there was a soldier; for every poem, a spear. And high on the Acropolis, the olive tree still grew, silent, patient, its roots deep in both soil and sorrow. As night settles now, imagine the city below, lanterns flickering, stone streets humming with footsteps. Above it all the goddess watches, gray eyes unblinking, guarding her people with thought instead of thunder. Next time, we will step beyond her walls to another age of heroes, a man of strength beyond measure, whose trials taught the gods themselves what endurance meant. The story of Heracles, the mortal who defied Olympus. The fire has dimmed now, just a quiet glow at the edge of the room. That's the perfect light for the story of a man who carried both divine power and unbearable sorrow, a man who would become a symbol of endurance for all ages. His name was Heracles, or, as the Romans would later call him, Hercules. He was born in Thebes, the son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Alcmene. Zeus, as always, had visited her in disguise, this time as her husband. And when the child came into the world, the heavens themselves seemed to stir. Zeus promised that a descendant of his, born that very day, would rule all of Greece. But Hera, who had endured too many of her husband's betrayals, would not let the child of another woman wear the crown of destiny. She delayed Heracles' birth and hastened that of another, Eurystheus, a lesser man who would become king in his place. From the first breath Heracles took, Hera's hatred followed him like a shadow. When he was still in the cradle, she sent 2 serpents to kill him. The child did not cry. He reached out, one hand to each snake, and crushed them before they could strike. The gods looked down in silence. Even Zeus felt something like fear, not for his son's strength, but for the fate it promised. Heracles grew into a man unlike any other, broad-shouldered, wild-eyed, his laughter as loud as his temper. He loved wine, song, and friendship, but he could never escape Hera's cruelty. One night, as he slept beside his wife Megara and their children, the goddess sent madness upon him. In that delirium, Heracles did what no human heart could bear. He killed his own family, believing they were enemies. When he awoke, the silence was unbearable. No thunder, no forgiveness, only grief. He fled to Delphi, where the oracle spoke. Your hands can be cleansed, but only through service. Go to King Eurystheus, the one who took your birthright, and obey him in all things. 12 labors will purge your soul. And so began a journey that would last years, filled with monsters, blood, and quiet lessons that no god could have taught more clearly. The first task took him to Nemea, a valley haunted by a lion whose skin could not be pierced. Heracles fought it with arrows, then with sword, and when neither worked, with his bare hands, he strangled it slowly, the earth trembling beneath his feet. Then he skinned it, using its own claws, and wore the pelt across his shoulders, a reminder that strength alone could be both armor and curse. Next came the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent with many heads. Cut off one, and 2 more would grow. Heracles fought alongside his nephew Iolaus, burning each stump with a torch so new heads could not rise. When at last The monster lay still. He dipped his arrows in its poisonous blood. Even victory, it seemed, could breed danger. Then came the Ceryneian hind, a golden deer sacred to Artemis. He chased it for a full year, never harming it, and when he finally caught it, he begged the goddess's forgiveness. She spared him, seeing that his hunt was not born of arrogance, but of necessity. The next trials tested not his muscles, but his patience. He captured the Erymanthian boar, cleaned the Augean stables in a single day by rerouting a river, and drove away man-eating birds from the lake of Stymphalus. Each victory brought no praise, only another command. But some labors carried darker lessons still. He tamed the Cretan bull, which once had terrified King Minos. He stole the man-eating horses of Diomedes, then realized the true monsters were not beasts, but men who had forgotten mercy. He took the belt of the Amazon queen Hippolyta, a gift freely offered, until Hera spread lies that turned peace into war. Each step seemed to lead him closer, not to redemption, but to exhaustion. Yet he continued, because there was nothing else left for him to do. When he came to steal the cattle of Geryon, a giant with 3 bodies, he crossed the western sea and built great pillars at the edge of the world. Those pillars, they said, still stand today at the Strait of Gibraltar, the mark of the farthest reach of mortal courage. His penultimate task was to fetch the golden apples of the Hesperides, guarded by a dragon. Even Heracles, for once, was unsure how to begin. He sought help from Atlas, the Titan who bore the weight of the heavens. "I will hold your sky," Heracles said, "if you will fetch the apples." Atlas agreed, delighted to rest for the first time in eternity. When he returned, he offered to take the apples himself to Eurystheus, leaving Heracles to hold the heavens forever. But Heracles, smiling, pretended to agree, asking Atlas to take the sky just for a moment while he adjusted his grip. When the Titan did, Heracles stepped away, apples in hand. A mortal had outwitted eternity. The final labor took him to the realm of Hades. He was to bring back Cerberus, the 3-headed hound that guarded the gates of the dead. With nothing but his courage, Heracles descended into the shadowed world. He did not fight the dog. He spoke to it, promising no harm. And when he returned to the world above, Cerberus followed calmly, his 3 heads turning in wonder at the light. When all was done, Heracles was free. But freedom for him meant little. He had killed monsters, gods, even the ghosts of his own sins. Yet peace remained distant. He wandered for years, a hero in name, a man in truth. In the end, Hera's vengeance found him once more through a poisoned robe sent by a jealous heart. As the venom burned his flesh, Heracles climbed Mount Ota, built his own funeral pyre, and lay down upon it. The fire rose high into the evening sky, but from its heart came something no flame could destroy: light. Zeus lifted his son to Olympus, granting him immortality. Hera, finally weary, forgave him, and so Heracles became a god, not of thunder or sea, but of endurance, of the strength it takes to bear one's own sorrow. When you see the stars tonight, look near Orion's belt. There, faint but eternal, burns the constellation of Heracles, a reminder that even in our pain, something divine might still be found. Next, we'll turn from muscle to mind, from battles of the body to those of the spirit. The age of kings will fall away, and a new age of destiny will begin. The story of Troy, of love, pride, and a war that outlasted even its victors. The fire flickers again, and the room feels smaller, as if the air itself knows what comes next. This story begins with a wedding and ends with ashes. The greatest of all wars, born not from hunger or conquest, but from something far quieter: jealousy. It began on Olympus. Peleus, a mortal hero, was to marry Thetis, a sea nymph whose beauty even the gods envied. They invited every divine being to the feast, every god, every muse, except one, Eris, goddess of discord, and slighted gods are dangerous guests. She arrived anyway, silent as smoke, and placed upon the banquet table a golden apple. Upon it, one word gleamed: to the fairest. 3 goddesses reached for it at once: Hera, queen of the gods; Athena, goddess of wisdom; and Aphrodite, goddess of love. Each believed she deserved the title. None would yield, and so began a quarrel that would tear apart the mortal world. Zeus, unwilling to choose between them, turned to a man, Paris, a prince of Troy, known for his beauty and calm judgment. The goddesses appeared before him in a quiet glade, each offering a bribe. Hera promised power, kingdoms that would bow before him. Athena promised wisdom, victory in every battle. Aphrodite promised love, the heart of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris, young and dazzled, chose love, and with that choice, the apple passed from the heavens into history. The woman Aphrodite had promised was Helen, queen of Sparta, already wed to King Menelaus. When Paris visited her court, beauty became destiny. Helen saw him, and something ancient stirred, not love perhaps, but longing for something beyond her gilded cage. When he left, she went with him, and the wind carried their sails toward Troy. Behind them, the world began to burn. Menelaus called upon his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, and together they summoned the princes of Greece. Among them came Achilles, Odysseus, Ajax, and countless others, heroes whose names would echo long after their bones had turned to dust. They built a fleet of 1,000 ships and sailed east under black banners. The war would last 10 years. Troy stood proud on its hill, its walls said to have been built by the gods themselves. From its gates, King Priam watched the horizon turn white with sails. His sons stood beside him, noble Hector, fierce Deiphobus, and Paris, whose choice had doomed them all. The battles that followed were not of armies, but of legends. Achilles, the son of Thetis, moved through the field like a storm-given flesh. Hector met him blow for blow, a man born not of arrogance, but of duty. Each victory was followed by tragedy, each triumph by loss. And still, neither side yielded. The gods themselves could not resist the pull of the fight. Athena and Hera stood with the Greeks. Apollo and Aphrodite guarded Troy. Their quarrels turned the tides of battle. Their whims decided who lived and who fell. Mortals became pawns in a game played on clouds. One night, under a crimson moon, Achilles killed Hector. The prince's body was dragged behind a chariot, dust rising like smoke over the plain. Yet when Priam came, old and broken, to beg for his son's body, Achilles wept. He saw for a moment not an enemy, but a father. He returned the body, and for the first time in years, both camps were silent. Even war seemed ashamed, but peace, as always, was an illusion. Paris, with Apollo's help, shot an arrow that found Achilles' only weakness, his heel. The hero fell, and the sea seemed to darken with Thetis' grief. Without him, the Greeks faltered, until cunning found where strength had failed. It was Odysseus who conceived the trick. A gift, he said, a great wooden horse left before Troy's gates, as an offering to Athena. The Trojans, weary of war, believed it a sign of surrender. They pulled it inside, rejoicing as the city filled with music again. But when night came, the hidden Greeks emerged from within. By dawn, Troy burned. Its towers fell, its temples crumbled, and the sea carried away the cries of those who once called it immortal. Helen returned to Greece, her beauty unchanged, her name now a curse. Menelaus took her back, not from forgiveness, but from habit, as if war itself could be undone by silence. Of all who fought at Troy, few returned home unchanged. Most never returned at all. And yet, the war did not truly end. Its echo lived on, in songs, in warnings, in the weary eyes of those who dreamed of glory and found only ashes. Even the gods seemed quieter afterward, as though the smoke had reached Olympus and dimmed their light. Tonight, if you listen closely, you might still hear the faint beat of 1,000 oars across the sea, a sound carried not by wind, but by memory. Because the truth of Troy was never about victory. It was about how far love can fall when pride gives it wings. Next, we'll follow one man who did return, though it took him 10 years and all the courage the sea could demand. The story of cunning, loss, and homecoming, Odysseus and the Odyssey. The fire burns low, and the world feels quieter now. That's how Odysseus would have wanted it. No cheers, no thunder, just the soft rhythm of waves and the long ache of distance. His war had ended, but his story had not. For some men, the gods test through battle. For others, they test through the journey home. Odysseus was king of Ithaca, a small island wrapped in wind and stone. Before Troy, he had been a clever man, a builder, a thinker. It was he who first tried to avoid the war, feigning madness, sowing his fields with salt instead of seed. But when the Greek envoys placed his newborn son before his plow, he stopped. The gods had found him, and there was no turning back. 10 years of war, and now 10 more of wandering. His ships scattered, his men weary, Odysseus sailed into the open sea, unaware that Poseidon watched from below. The gods still angered that the clever king had blinded his son, the Cyclops Polyphemus. "Let him return," Poseidon muttered, "but only after he has lost everything." The journey that followed was a map drawn in suffering. They reached the island of the Lotus Eaters, where the air smelled sweet and the fruit made men forget who they were. Odysseus dragged his crew back to the ship, their mouths still stained with petals, their eyes lost in bliss. Then came the Cyclops, a giant who trapped them in his cave and fed on men as easily as he would bread. Odysseus offered him wine, strong and red, and when the creature fell asleep, he drove a sharpened stake into his single eye. As they fled, he called out his name in pride, "Tell your father it was Odysseus who blinded you." And from that moment, Poseidon's wrath was assured. They sailed on to Aeolus, keeper of the winds, who gifted Odysseus a leather bag containing all the breezes of the world. But curiosity, the old curse of mortals, undid them. His men, thinking it treasure, opened it while he slept. The winds burst free, driving them far from Ithaca once more. Next came the island of Circe, the enchantress, who turned men into swine with a flick of her hand. Odysseus, protected by a charm given by Hermes, faced her without fear. When she tried to curse him, the spell faltered. Her eyes softened, and for the first time in years, she saw a man who could not be bent. They stayed there for a year of quiet days and heavy nights, of comfort that slowly turned to sorrow. When he finally left, she warned him, "You will cross paths with death and live, but only if you remember who you are." The sea grew darker as they sailed past the sirens, creatures whose songs promised everything the heart had ever wanted. Odysseus had his men fill their ears with wax and tied himself to the mast. He alone listened, and though he screamed to be released, to follow that voice into the waves, his crew obeyed his orders. When they passed beyond the song, he wept, not from relief, but from the knowledge that beauty and destruction often speak with the same voice. Then came Scylla and Charybdis, the monster and the whirlpool, death on either side. He steered close to Scylla, losing 6 men in a heartbeat. Their cries followed him for years, long after their bones sank to the sea. On the island of Helios, his crew, starving and desperate, killed the sacred cattle despite Odysseus's pleas. The gods answered with a storm so fierce that all were drowned, all but him. He clung to a piece of driftwood, carried for days until he washed ashore on the island of Calypso. She was a goddess of beauty and loneliness, who offered him eternal youth, a home, and her love. For 7 years he stayed. But each evening he would walk to the shore and stare at the horizon, whispering his wife's name, Penelope. At last the gods took pity. Hermes came with a message, "Let him go." Calypso wept but obeyed, and so once again he built a raft and set his course for home. Poseidon tried one final time to break him, sending waves that tore the sky apart. But Odysseus held on, battered and bleeding, until he collapsed upon the sands of Phaeacia. There, the king's daughter found him, a stranger with seaweed in his hair, eyes full of years. She brought him food, rest, and kindness. When the Phaeacians heard his story, they wept and vowed to return him home. Their ship carried him to Ithaca at last, sleeping under a blanket of mist. He awoke to silence. His palace was overrun by suitors, men who had spent years feasting in his hall, pressing Penelope to remarry. She had kept them at bay with one trick, weaving a burial shroud by day and undoing it by night. "Once it's finished," she told them, "I will choose." It never was. Odysseus, disguised as a beggar, entered his home unseen. He watched the suitors laugh and drink his wine, and something inside him, something quiet and ancient, steadied. With the help of his son Telemachus, he revealed himself. The bow that none could string bent easily in his hands, and in a rain of arrows, justice returned to Ithaca. When at last the hall was silent, he found Penelope. She looked at him, older, worn, uncertain. "Prove it's truly you," she said softly. He smiled, describing their bed, carved from the trunk of a living olive tree, a secret only they knew. Then she wept, and the sea inside him finally calmed. Odysseus had faced gods, monsters, and temptations, yet his greatest battle was against forgetting who he was. Home, it turned out, was not a place, but a memory, the single thread that kept him human. As the stars rise tonight, think of that. The man who wandered not to find glory, but to remember love. Every journey since has carried a piece of his shadow, a whisper of his stubborn heart. Next, we'll travel to an older story still, one that takes place not on the sea, but beneath it. The tale of gods who ruled the depths and of mortals who dreamed of touching eternity. The legend of Poseidon and Atlantis. Take another slow breath. The night has deepened, and the waves outside your window have grown quiet. They always do when we begin this part of the story, the one about the city that drowned itself in its own reflection. A place so perfect that even the gods envied it. Atlantis. They say Poseidon, lord of the seas, once looked upon a lonely island far beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. It was untouched by war or greed, covered in green hills and silver rivers. There he found a mortal woman named Cleito, whose voice was said to sound like rain falling on marble. He loved her, and to protect her, he built a palace on the highest hill. Around it, he carved great circles of land and sea, each ring glittering with bridges and towers that shone like polished stone. In that place, Poseidon and Cleito had 10 sons, demigods who would rule the island together. The eldest, Atlas, gave the city his name. Under his watch, Atlantis flourished. Its fields grew gold in the sun, its temples rose higher than clouds, and its people built machines that could move mountains. They mined orichalcum, a metal red as fire, and lined their temples with it until the entire island glowed at sunset. It was said that at night, sailors could see Atlantis shining from beyond the horizon, a beacon of divine favor. The Atlanteans worshipped Poseidon above all. They built for him a temple so vast that whales could swim beneath its bridges, and the roof was said to gleam like the surface of the sea. In its center stood a statue of the god himself, driving 6 winged horses through waves that seemed to move when the moonlight touched them. Every spring they offered bulls in his honor, their blood mixing with salt water as the priests sang hymns older than time. For 1,000 years, Atlantis lived in peace. Its people were wise, disciplined, and kind. Their laws came from Poseidon's own hand, carved into a pillar of orichalcum in the heart of the city. No one disobeyed them, no one had reason to. But perfection, like sunlight on water, cannot last. The sons of Poseidon had children of their own, and their blood grew thinner with each generation. The divine faded, and what remained was only human, proud, restless, greedy. They began to look outward to the lands across the sea. They saw other kingdoms, smaller, poorer, and decided to conquer them. Their ships darkened the horizon. Their armies carried banners of red and gold. For the first time, the world feared Atlantis. Far to the east, in Athens, another city stood, smaller, humbler, but uncorrupted. Its people lived not in marble towers, but in thought and balance. When the Atlanteans sent their fleet to subdue them, the Athenians gathered under their goddess Athena and fought back. The war lasted only one night. When dawn came, the great army of Atlantis had fallen, and somewhere deep beneath the waves, Poseidon stirred. The gods do not shout when they are angry. They whisper, and the sea listens. That night, storms unlike any before tore across the world. The sky split open, lightning striking sea and shore alike. Atlantis trembled. Its towers swayed, its bridges cracked. The earth groaned, and the ocean rose to meet it. In a single day and night, the island disappeared, swallowed whole by the sea. Only whirlpools and silence remained. Some say it was punishment, the gods reclaiming what man had spoiled. Others say the Atlanteans brought it upon themselves, their own pride heavier than any anchor. But there are gentler stories, too, that not all were lost, that a few ships escaped the storm, carrying knowledge, art, and memory, that those survivors built new cities across the world, Egypt, Manoa, perhaps even Athens itself, a single ember of what Atlantis had been, And though the island vanished, its name did not. For centuries, sailors swore they saw strange lights beneath the waves or heard faint music rising from the depths on windless nights. Even now, explorers search the sea floor, chasing the ghost of a civilization that refused to stay buried. Perhaps Atlantis was never a place at all. Perhaps it was a warning, a mirror held up to every age that thinks itself untouchable. For what destroyed it was not the anger of gods, but the same old story. Too much power, too little humility. Still, if you listen closely, when the tide is low and the air is still, you might hear it. The hum of lost engines, the rhythm of distant waves brushing against marble long turned to sand, the heartbeat of a city that dreamed too beautifully to last. And so the sea became both cradle and grave, the beginning and the end of all things. But every story that sinks gives rise to another. Because while Atlantis drowned, the myths of Greece were still being written by poets, by philosophers, by those who sought to turn loss into wisdom. Next time, we will climb back to the surface, to a world where God still whispered in the ears of men, where oracles shaped destinies, and one prophecy changed the course of a kingdom. The story of Oedipus, the man who ran from fate and ran straight into it. Tonight, the air feels heavier. The stories of heroes and lost kingdoms have faded into something quieter, more human. This is not a tale of war or monsters, but of destiny, and how even those who run from it can never leave its shadow behind. It begins, as many Greek stories do, with a prophecy. In the city of Thebes, King Laius and Queen Jocasta longed for a child. But when their prayers were answered, the oracle of Delphi sent a message darker than any storm. If this child grows to manhood, it said, he will kill his father and marry his mother. Laius felt the words burn into him like poison, and fear, the oldest god of all, took hold. When the baby was born, Laius could not bear to look at him. He pierced the child's ankles and ordered a servant to abandon him on the mountain. The man obeyed, though his hands trembled, but when he reached the cliff, he could not finish the deed. Instead, he gave the baby to a shepherd from Corinth, and the child lived. He was named Oedipus, swollen foot, for the scars on his ankles. And he grew into a bright, kind man, loved by the people who thought him their prince. But the whisper of destiny does not fade. It waits. When Oedipus came of age, a drunken guest at a banquet mocked him, saying he was not his father's son. Shaken, Oedipus went to Delphi to seek the truth. There, the oracle answered not his question, but his future. You will kill your father and marry your mother. Horror struck him like lightning. Determined to outrun fate, he fled Corinth, never to return, not knowing he was leaving the wrong home behind. On the road, dust rising around his sandals, he met an old man in a chariot. The man's servants pushed him aside. Pride flared, the kind of small human pride that changes everything. Words became blows, and when it was done, the old man lay dead. Oedipus walked on, unaware that he had already fulfilled the first half of the prophecy. Ahead lay Thebes, a city strangled by fear. At its gates crouched the Sphinx, a creature with the body of a lion, wings of an eagle, and the face of a woman. She asked every traveler a riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? Those who failed to answer were devoured. None had survived. When Oedipus arrived, she smiled, her eyes glinting like knives. He listened, thought for a long while, and said softly, "Man, he crawls as an infant, walks upright as an adult, and leans on a staff in old age." The Sphinx stared at him, her face unreadable. Then she laughed, a sound like shattering glass, and leapt from the wall into the abyss. Thebes was saved. The people, in gratitude, made Oedipus their king. They gave him the throne, and with it the hand of the widowed queen Jocasta. And for years peace reigned. The city prospered. Children played in the streets, the fields were green, and the king was loved. But peace built on ignorance is only a pause before the truth. When the gods sent a plague to Thebes, Oedipus swore to find the cause. He called for the blind prophet Tiresias, who hesitated to speak. "Leave it," the old man said. "There are truths that should sleep." But Oedipus pressed him, angry, desperate, and at last Tiresias sighed. "You are the curse you seek." The words hung in the air like thunder. Oedipus raged, denying everything, but doubt began to whisper. He questioned every servant, every traveler, piecing together fragments of memory. And then one day, a messenger came from Corinth. His father was dead. Relief flooded him. The prophecy, he thought, was false. But then the messenger added softly, "You were not his son. You were found on a mountain, a baby with bound feet." Jocasta's hands trembled. Her eyes met his, full of a knowledge too terrible to speak. She fled to her chamber. When Oedipus followed, she was hanging from her veil. The truth had come full circle, and when he understood it, that he had killed his father and married his mother, he took the brooch from her dress and drove it into his own eyes. He walked into exile, blind, but finally seeing. The road he took was the same one he had once walked as a young man, full of hope. Now it was lined with silence. When he reached the grove of Colonus outside Athens, he sat beneath an olive tree and asked for rest. There, as thunder murmured in the distance, the earth opened gently, and he was gone, swallowed not by punishment, but by mercy. His story spread across Greece like a shadow, not as a tale of sin, but as a reminder that even wisdom cannot escape what is written. Kings and peasants alike spoke his name with reverence and fear. For in Oedipus they saw themselves forever walking the line between ignorance and truth. And perhaps that is what makes the myth so lasting. Not the horror, but the understanding that fate, however cruel, is only another name for the things we cannot face within ourselves. Now let the night breathe again. Thebes sleeps, its stones cool beneath the moon. The gods have gone quiet for a time, but their silence is never empty. It is waiting. Next, we will listen to the voice of prophecy once more, but this time from those who spoke it, the oracles, the seers, the women who lived between worlds and dared to speak for the gods. There are moments in Greek myth when the world seems to fall silent. No battles, no kings, no monsters waiting in the dark. Only the wind moving through olive branches and a voice, soft, strange, and certain, rising from the heart of the earth. That voice was prophecy. And those who spoke it were the oracles. The most famous of them all lived at Delphi, where the slopes of Mount Parnassus met the clouds. There, beneath the shining temple of Apollo, a fissure in the earth exhaled a breath that smelled of honey and smoke. From it, a vapor rose, the breath of the god himself, they said. Above it sat the Pythia, the oracle of Delphi, always a woman, always chosen. She would breathe in the sacred fumes, her body trembling, her eyes half closed, and speak in a language that was not her own. Kings, generals, and wanderers climbed the mountain to ask her questions. They brought gifts of gold, silver, and laurel, but none could buy certainty. The Pythia did not give answers. She gave riddles wrapped in truth, like threads that only destiny could untangle. When Croesus, the proud king of Lydia, asked whether he should go to war against Persia, she replied, "If you cross the river, you will destroy a great empire." He smiled, thinking she meant his enemies. But the empire that fell was his own. When a young man named Socrates asked whether anyone was wiser than he, the oracle answered, "No man is wiser." And so he spent his life trying to prove her wrong, and in doing so, proved her right. The priests who tended the temple said Apollo spoke through her directly. Others whispered that she spoke from something deeper, from the voice of the earth itself, older than gods, older than Olympus. When her trance ended, she would fall silent for days, her hands still shaking. Those who had heard her left both enlightened and afraid, for nothing the oracle said could ever be undone. But Delphi was not alone. In Dodona, in the far north, there was another oracle, older even than Apollo's. There, the priests listened not to vapors, but to the rustling of oak leaves. They said Zeus spoke through the wind, his voice moving through branches like a breath through harp strings. Travelers would sleep beneath those sacred trees, hoping for dreams sent by the god himself. When they woke, they carried the rustle of leaves in their ears, convinced it was guidance. Across Greece, prophecy was not a question of belief, but of patience. The gods did not shout, they whispered, and the wise learned to listen not for words, but for what followed them, silence. Sometimes prophecy came not from temples, but from wanderers, women who lived between worlds, neither divine nor mortal. The Sibyls, they were called. They traveled from city to city, carrying scrolls of riddles and warnings, their eyes clouded with visions. One of them, the Cumaean Sibyl, once offered the Roman king Tarquin 9 sacred books containing the future of his empire. He refused her price, laughing. So she burned 3, then 3 more. When only 3 remained, he paid whatever she asked. Those books, they say, guided Rome for centuries, until fire took them too. Even in myth, the oracles never lied. But truth, spoken too soon, is a kind of curse. That was their burden. They saw what was coming and knew that no one would believe them until it was too late. The Greeks feared them, revered them, and pitied them all at once. To live with sight so clear was to walk always on the edge of madness. Some said the Pythia aged quickly, her hair turning white after only a few seasons of prophecy. Others said she never aged at all, that each oracle was only the next vessel of the same eternal voice. And when wars began, when heroes rose and fell, it was always Delphi they turned to, a mountain whisper deciding the fates of cities. Even Alexander the Great came there once, demanding an answer before his conquest. When the oracle refused to speak on an unchosen day, he dragged her by the arm until she cried out, "You are invincible!" He let her go, smiling. "Now the god has spoken," he said. But even he, the son of Zeus in his own mind, would die young and far from home, proving that prophecy needs no permission to be fulfilled. What makes these stories linger is not the magic, but the mirror. For in every oracle's voice is the same question we still ask. If you could know your future, would you want to? Perhaps that's why the gods chose women to speak for them. because they understood the balance of power and mercy, truth and silence. Their voices echoed not with thunder, but with patience, reminding all who listened that destiny is not shouted from the heavens. It is whispered in the pauses between our own choices. And maybe that's where myth and life truly meet, not in the miracles, but in the quiet warning that every step forward carries an echo of what's already been spoken. Now the temples sleep again, the leaves of Dodona still, the fissure at Delphi cooled. The age of prophecy fades, and a new kind of voice begins to rise, not the voice of gods, but of those who dared to challenge them. Next time, we will descend into that defiance, into the underworld itself, the realm of Hades, where the dead still dream and love dares to walk where even gods hesitate. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice. There are stories in which words are stronger than swords, where courage is not found in battle, but in the trembling of a single voice that refuses to fall silent. And among all those stories, one name shines like a note that never fades: Orpheus. He was the son of a muse, Calliope, and a mortal poet. They said he could charm the stones themselves. When he sang, rivers slowed their course, trees bent closer to listen, and even wild beasts forgot their hunger. His lyre was a gift from Apollo, carved of cedar and strung with light. Every melody he played seemed to come not from his hands, but from the pulse of the world itself. In the beginning, Orpheus sang only for joy, for sunrise, for laughter, for love. And then, one spring morning, he met Eurydice. She was a nymph who walked barefoot through meadows, her laughter soft as wind through tall grass. When she looked at him, the world seemed to pause, not from magic, but from recognition, as if every note he'd ever played had been waiting for her to hear it. Their love grew quietly, like vines climb in sunlight. When they married, even the gods were said to have smiled. But happiness in myth never lingers long. That same day, as Eurydice wandered through the fields, she stepped on a serpent hidden among the flowers. The bite was swift. By the time Orpheus found her, she was already fading. He called her name, his voice breaking, but her fingers slipped from his, and she was gone, taken to the underworld. For days he did not eat or sleep. He only played soft, broken melodies that made the stars themselves seem to weep. The sound of his lyre reached Olympus, then sank through the cracks of the earth until even Hades heard it. And then Orpheus made a choice no mortal had ever dared before. He would follow his music into death. Carrying his lyre, he descended into the dark. Past the gates guarded by Cerberus, the three-headed hound, whose growl faltered at the sound of his song. Across the river Styx, ferried by Charon, who for the first time forgot to ask for a coin. Through fields of whispering spirits, where the air shimmered like silver mist. The further he went, the more the shadows gathered, not in menace, but in awe. At last, he stood before Hades and Persephone, rulers of the dead. They listened as he played, his song not a plea, but a memory of sunlight, of laughter, of the fragile beauty of life. Even Hades, whose heart was said to be colder than stone, turned his gaze away. When the last note faded, silence followed, a silence so deep that the underworld itself seemed to hold its breath. Persephone spoke first. "Your music has moved even the lifeless. Take her, but do not look back until you both reach the world above." Orpheus bowed, his heart bursting with hope and terror. Eurydice appeared behind him, pale and silent, her form flickering like morning mist. He could not see her, only feel the faint warmth of her steps as they climbed the path upward. At first, the way was easy. The darkness began to thin, the scent of earth replacing the chill of stone. He could almost taste sunlight, but doubt is the most dangerous shadow of all. He wondered if she was truly there, if perhaps the gods had tricked him. And so, just before the first rays of light touched his face, he turned. For one heartbeat, he saw her, her eyes wide with love and sorrow. Then she was gone, drawn back into the dark, her hand reaching for his and missing by the width of a breath. They say his cry echoed through every cavern of the underworld, a sound so pure that even the Furies wept. But no song, however beautiful, could undo what was done. He wandered for years afterward, his music now soft and hollow, like wind over an empty field. Wherever he played, the world seemed to remember her. Flowers bent toward his feet. Rivers changed their course to follow him, not out of joy, but of mourning. In time, even life grew tired of his sorrow. One dawn, as he sat by a quiet stream, singing to no one, the Maenads, frenzied followers of Dionysus, came dancing through the forest. They could not bear his silence among their madness, and so they tore him apart. But even then, his head, carried by the current, kept singing her name, Eurydice, Eurydice, until it reached the sea. Yet the gods took pity at last. In the realm of the dead, Orpheus found her again, and this time there was no condition, no backward glance, just two shadows walking side by side through the endless meadows of the underworld, where no serpent waits and no song must end. His lyre, they say, was carried to the heavens by Apollo and placed among the stars. Even now, on clear nights, you can find it, the constellation Lyra, shining softly over sleeping fields, the music of a man who loved too deeply to forget. And if you ever wake in the dark and hear something faint, like a whisper of strings carried by the wind, don't be afraid. It is only Orpheus, still playing somewhere between life and death, reminding the world that love, once sung, never truly dies. Next, we'll leave the shadows behind for a moment and rise again to the sunlit heights of Olympus, where the gods themselves learned the cost of power, a tale of rivalry, rebellion, and the fall of Titans. The wind that carries stories across ages seems to change its sound when it rises toward Olympus. It no longer hums softly through olive trees. It roars. Because what happened before Zeus's rule was not peace nor harmony, but a storm of beginnings, the kind that breaks worlds before it builds them anew. This is the story of the war before the gods, the fall of the Titans. Long before men built temples, before the moon had a name, the world was young and quiet. Out of that stillness rose Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky. From their union came 12 children, the Titans, vast and powerful, their eyes glinting like the edges of mountains. They ruled the dawn of time, each embodying a force of the world itself. Oceanus, who circled the earth in water, Hyperion, who shone like fire, Themis, who held the scales of order, and for a while the world was balanced. But creation always asks for something more. Uranus, fearing his children's strength, imprisoned them deep within Gaia's body, trapping them in darkness. Their mother's pain became unbearable. Every mountain trembled, every sea boiled. In her anguish, she forged a blade of flint and gave it to her youngest Titan son, Cronus. And when Uranus came down to rest upon the earth, Cronus struck. With one blow, he severed the sky from the earth, freeing his siblings and ending the age of his father. From the blood of Uranus came the Furies, the giants, and the first whispers of vengeance. Cronus became king, the ruler of a new order. He married his sister Rhea, and together they gave birth to a second generation of gods, the Olympians. But prophecy, that patient shadow, returned once again. It was said that Cronus, like his father before him, would one day be overthrown by his own child, and fear, as it always does, made him cruel. Each time Rhea bore a child, Cronus swallowed it whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon all vanished into his belly, trapped in a timeless dark. Rhea wept until the rivers overflowed, and when her sixth child was born, she could bear it no longer. In secret, she hid the infant in a cave on the island of Crete and placed a stone in his place. Cronus, blind with suspicion, devoured the stone and believed himself safe. The child's name was Zeus. He grew among nymphs and goats in the shadows of Mount Ida, nourished by honey and laughter. Each night, the Curetes, warrior spirits, danced and clashed their shields to drown out his cries, so Cronus would never hear. When Zeus became a man, he returned to the world above, clever and unyielding. With the help of his grandmother Gaia, he tricked Cronus into drinking a potion that made him vomit up his swallowed children. One by one, the gods emerged, gasping, reborn, furious. The time for peace was over. What followed was the Titanomachy, a war that split heaven and earth. For 10 years, the sky burned red, and the mountains cracked beneath the weight of gods. Thunder and fire clashed against stone and shadow. Zeus led the Olympians from Mount Olympus. Cronus led the Titans from Mount Othrys. Lightning rained down like silver spears, oceans rose in walls of fury, stars fell like arrows. Even Gaia, mother of all, wept to see her children destroy each other. The Titans were vast, but they were old, bound to the order of a fading world. The Olympians were young, swift, and unrestrained. At Zeus's side fought his brothers Poseidon, wielding the sea, and Hades, who commanded the shadows. Their sisters gave counsel and aid, Hera's cunning, Demeter's nourishment, Hestia's fire. But the war was still balanced, endless, until Zeus sought help from even deeper powers. He descended into Tartarus, the pit beneath all pits, where the 100-handed giants, the Hecatoncheires, were chained. Each had 50 heads and 100 arms, strong enough to crush mountains. He freed them, along with the Cyclopes, who in gratitude forged weapons for the new gods. For Poseidon, a trident that could shake the seas. For Hades, a helm of invisibility. And for Zeus, the thunderbolt, bright as creation, final as judgment. With those weapons, the tide turned, the heavens split open, and Zeus hurled bolt after bolt until the Titans fell screaming into the abyss. Cronus tried to stand against him, but the sky itself seemed to turn against the old king. When the thunder stopped, there was only silence and smoke where the Titans had stood. Zeus chained them in Tartarus behind walls of bronze, guarded by monsters older than sin. Even there, the ground trembled with their rage. The war was over, the age of Titans ended, and the age of Olympians began. Zeus divided the world with his brothers, the sky for himself, the sea for Poseidon, and the underworld for Hades. The earth, rich and wild, would belong to all. And yet, even in victory, the gods could not escape what they had inherited. the fear of being replaced. For the cycle never truly ends. From father to son, from God to God, from age to age, power passes like a flame, never held for long. And somewhere deep beneath Olympus, Cronus still dreams, waiting for the day his children's children forget what he suffered. So when you look up at the thunder or down at the sea's endless shifting, you are watching a truce, not peace, a pause between storms. But before the quiet of this night settles again, we'll listen to one last echo from that ancient war, a tale of rebellion not from gods or kings, but from humankind itself. For Prometheus, the Titan who loved men more than Olympus ever would, was still watching. There are flames that warm and flames that awaken. In every age, there is one spark that refuses to die even when gods themselves try to smother it. That spark began with Prometheus. He was a Titan, born of Iapetus and the Oceanid Clymene, brother to Atlas, Menœtius, and Epimetheus. When the war between Titans and Olympians tore the heavens apart, Prometheus chose the side of Zeus. It was not loyalty that guided him, but foresight, for his name meant the one who thinks before. He saw that the world must change or die, but he did not foresee how cruelly the new gods would guard their order. After the war, when Olympus rose from the ashes of chaos, the earth lay barren. The seas were calm, the winds obedient, yet the world felt empty, a stage without actors. And so Prometheus shaped clay in his hands and formed the first humans. He molded them in the image of the gods, upright and curious, with faces lifted to the sky. Athena, moved by pity, breathed life into them. Their eyes opened, and they saw light for the first time. But Zeus looked upon them and frowned. He saw creatures frail and clever, the kind that might one day ask too many questions. He decreed that humankind would live simply, with no fire, no knowledge beyond what nature offered. They would bow, worship, and remain small. Prometheus watched them shiver in caves, cold and hungry, and felt something the gods had never known: compassion. He saw them suffer through long nights, their hands reaching for warmth that never came, and he could not bear it. One night, as Olympus slept beneath a curtain of stars, he climbed the mountain's highest peak. There, from the chariot of the sun itself, he stole a single ember, small enough to fit in a reed, bright enough to change everything. He carried it down to earth, hidden beneath his cloak. When he placed it in human hands, the world changed color. Flames rose for the first time, and shadows danced. Men gathered around it, laughing, cooking, forging. They lifted their faces toward the smoke and felt, for the first time, not fear, but hope. But smoke has a way of climbing. When Zeus saw the firelight from Olympus, rage consumed him. The sky shook with thunder. "Who dared?" he demanded, though he already knew. Prometheus stood before him unflinching. "I gave them what you denied, the light of understanding." The punishment was cruel, as God's vengeance often is. He was chained to a pillar of rock high in the Caucasus Mountains, where the winds cut like knives. Each morning, an eagle sent by Zeus tore open his side and feasted upon his liver. Each night, his flesh healed, only for the torment to begin again. Immortality, once a gift, became a curse. But the story did not end in agony, because even chained, Prometheus remained defiant. He laughed at thunder, he spoke to the winds, and told them stories of mankind's first fires. He whispered that the flame could never be unlearned, that men would build cities, ships, and dreams. And in time, They did. Centuries later, when the world was older and Zeus's rule had softened, a hero came climbing the cliffs. It was Heracles, the son of Zeus himself. He pitied the Titan's suffering and slew the eagle with a single arrow. With a swing of his sword, he shattered the chains. Prometheus fell to his knees, free at last, though the scars would never fade. As the wind brushed against him, he looked toward the plains below, where tiny lights flickered in the distance, campfires, proof that humankind had survived and learned and remembered. Zeus, though still proud, saw that the world had changed. He could not take back the fire, so he allowed Prometheus to live, though always as a reminder that knowledge has a price. Yet the gods were not finished teaching lessons. In revenge for Prometheus's theft, Zeus crafted another creation, a being of beauty and peril. He ordered Hephaestus to mold her from earth, Aphrodite to grant her grace, Athena to teach her craft, Hermes to gift her curiosity. Her name was Pandora. In her hand she carried a jar that none were to open. But curiosity, that same spark Prometheus had given to men, burned too brightly. When she lifted the lid, the world changed once more. Out flew sickness, envy, war, and sorrow, the shadows of knowledge. Only one thing remained trapped at the bottom of the jar: hope. And so, even in the age of pain, that one small light stayed with humankind. Prometheus's gift had never been about fire alone. It was the defiance to look up, to question, to build. The belief that warmth and wisdom are worth any punishment. Sometimes, when lightning flashes behind a mountain, people still whisper that it's Zeus remembering. And when the wind howls through high passes, it is Prometheus laughing. For his fire burns not in the hearths of men, but in their minds, in every thought that dares to rise higher than fear. Now the world stands on the edge between myth and memory. The age of Titans is gone, the reign of gods is fading, and humankind begins to walk on its own. But before Olympus grows quiet for good, there is one more tale, of a hero born not from the gods' love, but from their mistakes. A man who faced monsters not to win glory, but to understand what it means to be human. The final story of this night: Heracles, the mortal who became a god. The stars are quiet tonight. The sea has fallen asleep. And somewhere, between the dreams of gods and the dawn of men, a single figure stands, broad-shouldered, scarred, yet smiling through the weight of every story that came before him. Heracles, the last hero of the old world. He was born in Thebes, a city that never rested, under the shadow of Zeus's desire. The god of thunder had taken the form of a mortal man to lie with Alcmene, a queen whose virtue was matched only by her grace. When her son was born, his cry shook the rafters, a sound half human, half divine. Zeus named him Heracles, the glory of Hera, though it was the goddess herself who would curse him most. From the moment he drew breath, Hera's jealousy burned. She sent 2 serpents into his cradle, their scales glistening like wet emeralds. But the infant did not scream. He reached out, caught them by their throats, and crushed them in his tiny hands. When Alcmene found him cooing beside the lifeless snakes, she knew her child would never belong to ordinary men. As he grew, so did his strength. He trained under centaurs, wrestled lions, tamed wild horses, and learned the ways of kings and gods alike. Yet, for all his power, his heart remained gentle. He loved music more than war, laughter more than blood. But peace was never a gift the gods allowed their favorites for long. One evening, As he sat beside the hearth, Hera clouded his mind with madness. In a fit of divine cruelty, she made him see enemies where there was only family. When the spell broke, his home was silent. His wife and children gone by his own hand. Horror consumed him. He fell to his knees and begged the gods for punishment. It was the oracle of Delphi who answered. "To cleanse your soul," she said, "you must serve King Eurystheus and complete whatever labors he commands." And so began the 12 labors of Heracles, not as triumphs, but as penance. The first was the Nemean lion, whose golden hide could not be pierced by iron or bronze. For days he tracked it through shadowed forest, until, finding no weapon strong enough, he strangled the beast with his bare hands. He wore its skin as armor, not out of pride, but as a reminder of what his hands could do. Then came the Hydra of Lerna, a serpent with 9 heads, each sprouting 2 more when severed. Heracles burned the necks with fire, cauterizing the wounds until none remained. But the air was heavy with poison, and every breath stung his lungs. Still, he pressed on task after impossible task, capturing the Ceryneian hind, sacred to Artemis, cleansing the Augean stables of filth that had piled for decades, wrestling the Cretan bull, stealing the mares of Diomedes that fed on human flesh. Each trial tested not his strength, but his endurance, the quiet kind that asks a man to rise even when his spirit is ash. By his 10th labor, Heracles had crossed the known world. He had fought giants, sailed oceans, and stood at the edges of lands where the sky bent down to meet the sea. In his 11th, he stole the golden apples of the Hesperides, guarded by a dragon that never slept. And in the 12th, he descended into Hades itself, binding the 3-headed Cerberus with chains of will alone. When he returned to the world of light, even Zeus was silent, for no god had ever done so much and remained mortal. Yet Hera was not finished. She sent storms, wars, and betrayals, but Heracles endured them all, not through defiance, but through acceptance. He came to understand that his greatest labor was not killing monsters, it was mastering himself. When his final days arrived, he built his own funeral pyre on Mount Oeta. The flames rose, bright and slow, carrying away the weight of his mortal pain. And when the smoke cleared, there was no body, only the sound of thunder far above and a whisper of wind that felt like laughter. Zeus had lifted him to Olympus. There, among the immortals, Hera finally relented. She offered him ambrosia, and Heracles drank. The hatred that had chased him since birth dissolved like mist. The gods welcomed him, not as one of their own, but as a bridge between their fading world and the new one rising below. Because Heracles was not the end of power, he was the beginning of humanity's courage. He taught men that strength was not divine, but earned, that redemption was not granted, but fought for, that every burden, no matter how heavy, could be carried if the heart stayed steady. As centuries passed, his name became more than legend. It became a measure of what it means to endure, to keep walking even when the road is fire, and when the last temples fell silent, and the last priest whispered his final prayer, the stars above still remembered. They carved his story across the heavens, each constellation a spark of the ancient fire Prometheus had once given, a sky full of memory, a map of everything that came before. And so, with Heracles, the age of myth slowly dimmed. The gods, tired of their endless watch, withdrew beyond the clouds. The earth grew quieter. Men began to write, to question, to dream on their own. Philosophers replaced prophets. Poets replaced priests. And the voices of the gods became echoes in the wind. But sometimes, when lightning strikes far off and the air smells of rain and dust, you can almost hear them again. Zeus's laughter, Athena's wisdom, Artemis's quiet step through the forest. They are not gone. They have simply moved into our stories, and that perhaps is immortality enough. So now, as the night deepens, breathe once more. You have traveled through ages, from the birth of the world to its first songs, from the rise of gods to the dawn of men. The myths were never about power or punishment. They were about us, the small, fragile beings who looked up at the stars and imagined something greater, and in doing so, became greater themselves. Let the fire fade to embers. Let Olympus sleep. For the stories have done their work, and tomorrow the world will wake again, quieter, wiser, still warmed by that ancient light